Yo bar, what's up and what's happening, and welcome back to another episode of
It's the Yo Bar series
with me, Chris Harding. In today's episode of How to Diet and Do It Correctly, I'd like to give you 3 examples of clients that I've worked with who have successfully lost weight through 3 different avenues of doing so. So in previous episodes of How to Diet and Do It Correctly, we've talked about different things such as habits, how to formulate them and how to keep them. We've also talked about things such as intermittent fasting and calorie counting. We haven't touched so much on the ketogenic diet, and I will touch on that today. And we also have touched on different things such as the hormone dopamine and just how to diet in general. So the 3 different avenues that I'd like to suggest to you today are 1, ketogenic dieting, 2, intermittent fasting, and 3, calorie counting or macro counting, your macronutrients, which are your fats, proteins and carbohydrates. And the way that I'm going to touch on those today, guys, is I'm going to talk to you about 3 different clients that I have worked with and how they have had their success stories. And also I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into how I had my success stories with all 3 of those pathways. Okay, play the intro. Come on. So guys, let's jump straight into it. The ketogenic diet, or the keto diet as a lot of people know it to be, is a diet which is basically or fundamentally founded on the fact that you're going to reduce the amount of carbohydrates that you have per day to roughly about 50 grams. So 50 grams of carbohydrates in your intake from whatever food source you're having. The ketogenic diet encourages you to have more fat and more protein and less carbohydrate. Now let's quickly look at carbohydrate and what types of food groups can be called carbohydrates. So quite literally, you have your fruits, your vegetables, things such as breads and pastas, which are kind of processed foods. You have rice and grains. You also could really group alcohol into that food group, and you could also group in things like sweets, sugary drinks, and also things such as biscuits and snacks. Most of those foods are going to be carbohydrate rich, or they're going to come from a form of carbohydrate, whether they're naturally found such as a fruit or a vegetable, or whether they've been processed such as bread, pasta, or anything such as a sweet. So people who are either on the ketogenic diet or people who are looking to onboard with the ketogenic diet and you're currently doing research basically have to follow one simple principle, that they are not going to consume as much carbohydrate. Why is this? This is basically because carbohydrate is, especially processed carbohydrate, is one of the food groups or macronutrients that tend to spike insulin. Insulin is a hormone that is produced by your pancreas, and basically when you ingest carbohydrate, it turns into a sugar called glycogen. And when it turns into a sugar called glycogen, your insulin level tends to spike. Now, I must reinforce the fact that if you're having your carbohydrate from things such as more vegetables or salads and some certain types of fruit that don't have so much fructose in them, actually your insulin won't spike as high. The reason why it won't spike as high is because you're having, or you're choosing to have, carbohydrates which tend to come from fruit and vegetables, which obviously have fiber in them. However, when you choose to eat some food groups such as breads, pastas and cereals, anything which is basically a processed carbohydrate or a form of sugar, it raises the insulin inside your body too quickly, and therefore that process tends to have an ability to store the sugar or glycogen as fat. Therefore it makes you put on weight. So where the ketogenic diet is trying to guide you, or it's trying to help the individual, is it's trying to use body fat more, and it's trying to use carbohydrate less as a form of energy. And the reason why it's called the ketogenic diet is because the less carbohydrate in the body, the more the body will use body fat and turn body fat back into ketogens, and ketogens are used as a form of energy via the body when the body is low or doesn't have sufficient amounts of glycogen or sugar or carbohydrate in it. So the basic principles are less than 50 grams of carbohydrate per day, high amounts of protein and fat intake. You can eat pretty much most vegetables, but only some certain types of fruit. You don't necessarily have to track your macronutrients, so you don't have to track the amount of protein and fat that you're having during the day. The less processed the food, the better. So one of my clients decided to use ketogenic dieting as a way to be able to lose weight. She felt that she was slightly too overweight, and she was a little bit scared by the fact that COVID-19 could possibly affect her well-being, could affect her lifestyle, and obviously she didn't want to catch COVID-19, but at the same time, if she did, she wanted to be able to fight it from a better standpoint. And so she read a few articles, and she read a book called Unlocking the Keto Code. And from this, she then decided to start ketogenic dieting. Now, at the time, I was relatively new to keto dieting, and actually I had never done it before, and I had never actually worked with any client before who had actually done the keto diet. So this was all kind of quite new to me as a coach and as a personal trainer. My client was at the time slightly overweight. Her lifestyle was pretty healthy. She ate really well, but she was definitely someone who would snack a little bit too often, and she would also drink on occasion, but not that frequently. So we started the keto diet for her, and basically she had some really fantastic results to begin with. So the results were quite obvious weight loss, and her diet was quite easy because she really enjoyed to consume vegetables and salads. She also found it quite easy to be able to shift from having carbohydrate rich foods such as pastas and breads to turning to things such as chicken, fish, and sometimes she'd also have red meat as well. And I would say in the initial 6 weeks of her being on this diet, she had some really amazing results. Not only did she have weight loss, but she also felt that her shape had changed, she fitted into her clothes better, and she generally just felt a lot better overall. And on this keto diet, the client continued to improve, and also she continued to lose weight, but at some point the weight did actually start to slow down, which is a natural thing to happen when you are dieting. Now, when I'm dealing with clients and I'm suggesting diets or different types of lifestyle changes that they can take on board in order to be able to lose weight, I'm always looking for the length of time in which that thing is sustainable. So for example, if you did a diet which was very limiting in terms of what you can and can't eat, those diets don't tend to last very long because they tend to become limiting, frustrating, and also just boring. And in my opinion, the keto diet doesn't do that at all. It does give you a lot of option, and also it allows you to really be quite creative with the meals and the recipes that you can have. Now, there are two things that I would suggest to be aware of when you're looking at the keto diet. The first thing is that you pretty much can't come away from the keto diet. It is a lifestyle choice. Therefore, if you decide to come off that lifestyle choice or that diet for a certain period of time, you will find it quite hard to go back on. And I believe this is because the body has got used to having a certain routine and a certain type of food, that when you refeed certain types of processed foods back into the body, it actually is quite hard for the body to go back to the keto diet. I don't think it's healthy to yo-yo in and out of any type of diet, but especially the keto diet. And that is because I think it's just so difficult to be able to keep on track with it. The second thing that I would suggest with the keto diet is that when working with clients, I find that after a while they do stagnate. And I think this is because they are pretty much in the same routine or the same pattern day in, day out, week in, week out. Therefore, what I think you probably should do is switch things up from time to time. It probably is a good idea to actually take on more carbohydrate calories sometimes when you are starting to find that you're kind of getting into a bit of a lull. I think that a lot of people on the keto diet, and my client included, tend to get fixated on the fact that they want to lose weight. But obviously weight loss does take quite a lot of time, and if you suppress the amount of food that you're eating per day and you're not eating enough food, it's going to naturally lower or depress your metabolism. So it is a fantastic diet. It has got a lot of pros to it, but I think one of the quite obvious cons that I find when I'm working with clients is that they tend to stagnate and they tend to stop losing weight. And although they have been advised to lose weight or they want to lose weight, they tend to forget that they actually do need to eat enough fuel in terms of all your macros, your carbohydrates, your fats and your proteins to be able to fuel your metabolism and for your metabolism to be able to burn more body fat. However, as an overall, I would say that the keto diet, if performed properly, can be a much healthier option of dieting or lifestyle transformation. It tends to offer quite a lot of healthy recipes, and I think that a lot of the carbohydrate that you choose tends to lean more towards the fruit and vegetables than it does highly processed foods, which is obviously going to be much better for you. So overall, in my opinion, I think this is a fantastic option for you to explore if you feel that the keto diet would work for you. This diet does actually offer quite a lot. It offers the individual the opportunity to have flexibility. It offers the individual the opportunity to lose quite a decent amount of weight in a healthy way. And it also offers people who suffer with diseases such as type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, and people who also have blood pressure. It offers them a chance to be able to reduce those things because of the types of foods that you're eating. Obviously, as I said at the beginning, you are dropping out 1/3 of the macronutrient trio, which are proteins, fats and carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are the one that you're actually going to lower. And so therefore, because of that, your glycogen or your blood sugar tends to be lower, which also has a positive effect on your insulin levels, which also will tend to be lower and spike less. The second diet or lifestyle choice that I would offer to people would be intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, again, is another way to be able to control the intake of the individual when it comes to eating food. The way that this is done is by limiting your time. Therefore, the individual eats between 10, 8 or maybe 6 hours, and sometimes people can take it all the way down to just one meal per day, where they only eat one meal in 1 hour per day. So for example, if you were eating on an 8-hour window, you basically would eat for 8 hours and the other 16 hours would mean that you would fast. And what is believed is that this will actually lower the amount of insulin that your body produces throughout those 16 hours because it's not eating any food. And it's also believed that the body becomes better at digesting and using the food which it has been given, and if it can't use any extra energy, it will go to body fat and use that as an energy source rather than constantly relying on the intake of food that you have during your normal day. The positive things with intermittent fasting is that it allows people to take back control their time. Most people have to make time in the morning when they actually want to eat their breakfast or break their fast, and sometimes that doesn't always work well for them. Actually, quite a lot of people would prefer to eat at a slightly later time, and as long as they have a structure or a window of time to be able to eat, they're more than happy to be able to plan their working day or their schedule around intermittent fasting. So a client that I have been working with for a few years now, who has used intermittent fasting as a way to lose weight and also help control his insulin, has got some positive and also some negative experiences with IF. The reason why intermittent fasting for this individual client of mine had mixed reviews is basically because he liked the idea of being able to be in control of his eating window. So he would start his eating window at 12 p.m. and he finished at 8 most days. Sometimes he'd push back to 11 a.m. and sometimes he'd forward it to 1 p.m. So the type of flexibility he had with his window of time when he could consume was something that suited him because he's a very busy individual. So to give you a really brief background of this particular client that I worked with, he came to me quite overweight and he'd also been recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and so therefore he was pretty much willing to try anything. So we used intermittent fasting first to see how that would work out for him. Now, he definitely found that the positives were that he could control the times in which he ate. So if he wanted to knock back to 11 a.m. and then finish at 7 p.m, that was fine. If he wanted to start at 12 or 1 p.m. and finish a little bit later on because of his work schedule, that worked out really well for him too. The other thing that he liked is that when he was starting his day, he would be able to prepare his food a little bit better. Because he wasn't spending time making his breakfast, he was actually spending time preparing his food, which he also felt was a massive benefit to him because of his busy schedule. Because you don't break your fast until a certain time, it actually allows your body to be able to use the window of time when you're not eating to use body fat as a form of fuel, and also to keep your insulin levels lower, so your insulin isn't as resistant, because people who suffer with type 2 diabetes have got a very high resistance or tolerance towards their own insulin, which is why they have type 2 diabetes, and basically they have too much blood sugar inside their body at any given time. Their blood sugar levels are too high. So intermittent fasting was definitely one of those lifestyle traits or habits that allowed his blood sugar to naturally start to lower or decrease, which is why quite a lot of people do turn to intermittent fasting as a lifestyle choice where they can control the times in which they eat, and therefore that has a positive reflection on their type 2 diabetes and also can have a positive reflection on their weight loss. Now, the two things that I would suggest that you look out for when you're intermittent fasting are the fact that even though you're eating within a controlled period of time, you're eating within your window, let's say that's going to be 8 hours, you still obviously are going to eat food, you're going to have your meals. But the one thing that IF doesn't necessarily teach you is to eat better. Okay, it does actually encourage you to eat pretty much the diet that you were having before, but within a limited amount of time. So if you can imagine that you ate throughout the entire day, so let's say that you started eating at 8 a.m, then you had lunch at 1, and then you had a snack at 5, and then you had your final dinner at 7 or 7:30 p.m. Basically what that means is that you've eaten throughout the day, and throughout the day your blood glucose and your insulin levels will be going up and down, up and down. What intermittent fasting does is it controls that. It restricts it and it puts it in a time frame. That's absolutely fine. Now, what I have found working with some clients, and especially this client as an individual, is that he wasn't really choosing better foods to eat. Intermittent fasting doesn't really encourage that. Now, if you are an individual who does know how to eat better or does want to choose to start eating better, then that's obviously going to help you tremendously, because it's going to allow you to stop eating bad foods or highly processed foods or foods that are really high in sugar or saturated fat. Those are the types of foods that aren't going to help you in the long run. And the reason they're not going to help you in the long run is because they're not going to feed your gut microbiome very well. Your gut microbiome is very important, and if you feed it well, basically it's going to keep you feeling better, it's going to help your metabolism better, and it's going to be generally overall a better opportunity for you to lose weight and just feel healthier. But this client that I worked with, even though he took on intermittent fasting, the one thing that he said to me is, Chris, I'm still choosing to drink a lot of coffee. I'm still choosing to drink Diet Cokes. I'm still choosing sandwiches, and I don't feel that I'm really losing the type of weight that I want to lose. Intermittent fasting doesn't necessarily teach you to eat better. It just teaches you to eat within a window of time. What I suggest you do with intermittent fasting, and this is just from working with clients, is that you start to look at ways in which you can control the time and make the time a little bit more challenging. What I would suggest you may do is that you eat within an 8-hour window, you also eat within a 6-hour window, and you also eat within a very restricted window of maybe 2 to 4 hours. Why would you do this? Well, in basic layman's terms, you're going to keep the body interested. You're going to keep the body from stagnating. So you're still eating a decent amount of food. And as I said before, you should always really choose to eat low processed foods, foods that are rich in fiber, foods that are rich in fat and protein, and also have got some really healthy carbohydrates with them, foods that aren't very highly processed. But if you're going to choose intermittent fasting, and when I've done intermittent fasting myself, what I've done is I've found that by choosing to eat in different windows at different times and trying to spread that throughout my week, my working week, my body's always guessing, doesn't quite get used to the fact that I'm always going to eat within an 8-hour window between 12 and 8 p.m. Just as an example, it doesn't know when the next window is going to be, so therefore it has to pull resources or energy from different areas of my body to be able to use it until it can eat again. Now, the one thing that I'd also say as well is that when I've decided to have a really small window of time, so let's say that I only eat for 4 hours of the day, what I have chosen to do is I've prepared that day. So before I've actually got to that day, so let's say that day was the middle of the week, so let's say that I chose to eat on a Wednesday and I'm only going to eat for 4 hours, so I'm going to eat from 2 till 6 p.m. afternoon to early evening. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to prepare that day Monday or Tuesday, so a few days before, because I want to make sure that I don't get it too wrong. I want to make sure that my meals are prepared, so when I'm at work, the meals that I need to eat are going to be there for me to eat when I'm going to break that period of fasting. Okay, so I think where intermittent fasting can fail individuals is that it can get a bit boring and it doesn't necessarily teach you what you need to know in terms of eating better. But what I would suggest is that you look at choosing better foods that aren't as highly processed, and also foods that, like I said again, that are rich in fats, proteins and fiber, and also you're getting some decent carbohydrate from decent sources, and also that you mix things up, make things a challenge, make things interesting. I think that you would probably enjoy that process more, and your body would probably also respond to it better. So the pros of intermittent fasting are that it's easy to do, it's easy to onboard, and you do get some great results, and you definitely can lose weight. The cons of intermittent fasting are that it can get a little bit boring, so you need to change things so you don't stagnate, and also the fact that intermittent fasting doesn't necessarily teach you how to eat better, it just teaches you how to eat within a restricted window of time. The third diet or lifestyle choice that I would recommend my clients is calorie counting or macro tracking. So calorie counting is kind of quite a difficult one. It tends to be something where people get it really wrong really quickly. The reason that this is because I believe that there are guidelines to how many calories you should eat per day, but actually what a lot of people don't realize is that the calories that you burn per day are individual to you. Okay, so if you're someone who sits a lot, or you sit behind a computer, or you're not a very active individual, the amount of calories that you burn compared to someone who's very busy and does do a lot of activity and a lot of sport will have a different consumption need to the other. So basically what I mean is someone who sits behind a computer all day will only need a certain limited amount of calories because their body will be burning a low amount of energy, whereas compared to someone who's a postman or a postwoman will actually have a higher amount of calories because they're moving more, and it's literally based on that reason. Macro tracking slightly goes into the same thing. So for example, if you had an individual who was relatively active and we worked out that they needed roughly 2,500 to 2,600 calories per day for that individual, taking into account their sex, their age, their height and their activity level, basically what we would say is that the macronutrients that they would need would be of a certain percentage. So they're looking to hit a certain percentage of macros per day. The macros, as I've said before, are proteins, fats and carbohydrates. Now what we generally tend to do is we generally tend to look at the amount of protein that one is getting, and we also look at the amount of carbohydrate that one is getting. So when I've been working with clients, I've always tried to make sure that their carbohydrate intake is quite low. So what do I mean by low? Well, it can be as low as 50 grams per day. it can be in the middle region of 100 to 150, but I don't really work with any clients who have over 150 to 200 grams of carbohydrates per day, because I believe that's a little bit too high. Remember that my clients are people who are trying to either reverse their diabetes, lower their cholesterol, or actually just trying to lose weight. So we are trying to stay under 150 grams of carbohydrate per day, but this does depend on the individual. So for calorie counting and macro tracking, I'm actually going to use myself as an example. The reason why I'm using myself as an example is because I understand how to track macros, and I use a macro tracker or a calorie counter, which is called MyFitnessPal. There are lots of others online that you can download, but MyFitnessPal tends to be the one that I go to. Now, I have done it for a period of time and I've lost a lot of weight, or I've done it just to be able to keep on top of my general intake per day. So very briefly, when I joined the fitness industry, I was someone who had put on quite a lot of weight. And the reason I put on quite a lot of weight is because I was trying to bulk up and I was trying to become sort of more muscular. And I wasn't eating bad food, but I was eating a lot of calories and I got quite heavy. And I wasn't very happy with my look. And so I decided to go on a diet. And the diet that I chose to do was basically where I wanted to lower all the way down to a certain body fat percentage. So in order to achieve this the best way I could, I decided that I was going to start at 3,800 calories, and over a 12-week period I was going to drop all the way down to 3,000 calories. Now you must remember that my job is as a physiotherapist and also a personal trainer, and I also train between 4 to 5 times a week in the gym, and I have quite an active job. So with all of those things totaled, I actually didn't want to lose too much muscle mass. I wanted to be able to keep my muscle tone, and I wanted to be able to lose body fat. So I started at 3,800 calories per day, and over 12 weeks I dropped those calories all the way down to 3,000. In my experience, I am an individual who quite likes a challenge. I quite like someone giving me a challenge, or if I read something that intrigues me, especially when it comes to food, or especially when it comes to training, I quite like the idea of a challenge. So in terms of being very, very strict with the amount of calories that I was taking in per day and where I was getting those calories from was something that very much interested me. The things that I would say about calorie and macro tracking is that it is kind of a science. So it's definitely something that I think a lot of people can get really great results from if they stick to it. But I would probably say it's one of the hardest things to stick to. It's much harder than keto dieting. It's much harder than intermittent fasting. You basically are a human laboratory which is using an exact science on yourself. So let's say by any given day I was only allowed to eat 3,400 calories, and that I was only allowed to eat a certain amount of carbohydrate, and I was only allowed to consume a certain amount of fat. Or of that carbohydrate, let's say I was only allowed to consume a certain amount of sugar. That was all quite complex. It all took quite a lot of time, and it certainly is something that I don't think many people would like to do, because I don't feel that people have a lot of time when it comes to their diets, and that's completely fine. So what I would recommend with calorie counting and macro tracking is that it actually teaches you what you consume. So I'd like to give you a challenge. The challenge would be is that if you track between 3 to 5 days all the food that you consume and put it into an app such as MyFitnessPal, you'll be able to see how much you're actually intaking. You actually be able to see how many calories you're taking in per day, what type of calories they are, and also the amount of what macros you're kind of tending to go towards. So let's say that you're someone who eats quite a lot of breads, pastas, sometimes you had the odd treat here and there. The carbohydrate that you intake will be quite high, and that might be one of the reasons as to why you're storing weight so easily. The other thing is that you are creating a food diary. When you're tracking food, when you're tracking calories, you're actually keeping a diary of what you consume, and it's quite hard for an individual to be able to remember what they ate last Friday. Whereas when you're using an app such as MyFitnessPal, it allows you to go back to what you actually ate, and it allows you to look at what you're doing, and therefore you can start to make choices and decisions of how to eat better and how to track better, and just track every single thing that you have, even if it's something the size of a pea or a peanut. Just put it in on your MyFitnessPal or any calorie tracking app and just see what your diet looks like when it's written down. I guarantee that it will help you, and it will probably also surprise you. Remember, you need to make sure that you're not over consuming, and also importantly that you're not under consuming, because if you're under consuming, what you're going to do is you're going to start to lower your metabolism, and your body's going to struggle to lose weight because it doesn't want to drop weight, because basically it's not having enough energy, it's not having enough fuel. So the pros to calorie tracking or macro tracking are that they will lose weight. As I said before, it almost is an exact science because it's been worked out for you as an individual. It does allow you to track the foods that you're consuming, and it does give you a reflection on what you can change and what you can improve on, and how you can get better at just generally improving your diet. The negatives of this type of diet or lifestyle change are that it can be quite restrictive, it can be very, very repetitive, and it can also get quite boring. And also it does take up an awful amount of time because you're constantly weighing food, you're tracking food, which means you're writing it in a diet diary such as MyFitnessPal. And I think that after a period of time you kind of start to get a little bit disillusioned with it. When I've been working with clients before, I always make sure that they only do a very, very short amount of time on calorie tracking and macro tracking, just because I don't want them to get bored with the idea of losing weight. I want them to lose weight. They want to lose weight. They have employed me to lose weight. However, when you're trying to lose weight with a client, or whether you're trying to lose weight yourself, it's very, very important that you have an understanding of what you're doing currently so that you can move forward from that. If you don't understand what you're doing currently, then you won't be able to lose weight well. You might lose weight on all three of these diets. So if you look at the keto diet, if you look at the intermittent fasting diet, and if you look at the calorie or macro tracking diet, you will lose weight on all of these, but you want to think about this in the long term. Are you going to do this because you want to lose weight and then you want to stop at a certain time? Because if you do, then that's really more of a diet, and a diet doesn't really work. Diets don't really work for individuals because they only are ever temporary. They're only something that are going to lose weight for you, but you don't learn anything. But if you choose a diet which is going to affect your lifestyle for the positive, and it's actually going to help you to lose weight over a long period of time, it's going to be something that you want to do, and it's going to be something that you want to be able to keep doing for a long period of time. Over that long period of time, you are going to naturally just lose weight because you're going to be eating better, you're going to be eating at better times, and you're going to be, sort of quite importantly, preparing your food, preparing your meals, thinking about what you're eating. Those factors I don't think diets always consider. So it is more the fact that keto dieting, intermittent fasting, and also calorie tracking and macro tracking are all things that I feel are the three ways in which you can successfully lose weight, but you can also successfully continue to do those things for a long period of time. You could possibly look at it as a lifestyle change forever. Now, one thing that I would like you to consider is the fact that if you took two of those three diets and merge them together, you probably would actually have some fantastic results. So for example, if you took ketogenic dieting and also intermittent fasting and merged them together, that actually do quite a lot for you. The ketogenic dieting would probably teach you to eat better because you're not allowed to be able to eat so much processed carbohydrate, and the intermittent fasting would actually help you control that in a window of time. Therefore, you wouldn't need the third diet, which is calorie and macro tracking, because you're kind of doing it a different way. You're macro tracking because you're eating a ketogenic diet, which is there to basically be able to control what you are and what you're not going to choose to have, because it needs to be more fat and protein rich. The contents of your food needs to have those macros in it. And then also, rather than counting calories, you're more counting time, which is much easier, because all you've got to do it is in stages. So you've got to say, the first stage of my day, I'm generally not going to eat. Then the second stage of my day, which let's say breaks at 12 p.m, I'm going to eat, and I'm allowed to eat all the way through till 8 p.m. That's the second stage. And the third stage is basically going to be, well, when I stop eating is basically when I'm going to rest, I'm going to go to sleep. And again, I'm not going to break that all the way around until the next day, which could possibly be 12 p.m, or it could be a different time, but you get the point. The point is that you're eating within a window of time. And again, if you're choosing something such as ketogenic dieting, you are eating better forms or better quality food. On the other hand, you could use calorie counting and macro tracking as a way to keep a diary, very simply for a week to 2 weeks, so that you can see what you're doing. You could then look at your diary and make better choices through the ketogenic diet. So with the ketogenic diet, you're going to be having less processed carbohydrates, and you're hopefully going to be upping the amount of protein, fat and fiber that you're having, and therefore you can add that into your MyFitnessPal and see how that works for you. For example, if you've got a week where you're eating your normal diet, and then you're going to review those types of foods, and you're going to say, oh, okay, actually I'm eating quite a lot of processed carbohydrate here, my sugar is really high for that day. And then you look at the ketogenic diet, where you're going to say, well, I'm only allowed a certain amount of carbohydrate per day, what do I choose to have? That's going to make a very big difference. It's going to be very impactful on your overall outlook of how you're going to choose to eat, and over a period of time that will have a really successful result in terms of you losing weight overall, and also helping other things such as diabetes, high blood pressure and high cholesterol. So guys, I hope you found this video insightful, and it also gives you a way in which you can choose to lose weight successfully through the How to Diet and Do It Correctly series. I hope this video has been helpful to you. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and also comment below. It helps me make more great content for you. It also helps the YT algorithm, so the video can get more views, so I can help other people. Choose the right diet that works for you. Be fit, be healthy, and of course, be a boss bar.
It's the Yo Bossy Weeks.